In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Welcome to America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King, and tonight we're honored to share the journey of a scholar, advocate, and cultural memory keeper whose work bridges history, justice, and empowerment. Dr. C. Negus Rudison-Imhotep is a cultural memorial specialist and a scholar of African thought and a seasoned public servant. His life work spans education, social justice, advocacy, and Africa diasporic history. From Reading Imhotep Consultancy Group LLC to teaching at universities across Iowa, Dr. Rudison Imhotep has dedicated his career to cultural restoration, institutional equity, and historical reclamation. His leadership extends into public service, from chairing the Des Moines Civil and Human Rights Commission to serving on state boards that elevate the voices of marginalized communities. He is also the creator and host of Babylon Makes the Rules, a podcast that documents and analyzes the experiences of African and African descended people through an Afrocentric lens. His forthcoming book, From Sankofa to Strategy, offers a deeply personal exploration of his journey through activism, scholarship, and spiritual consciousness. Tonight, we'll explore his life story, his scholarship, his work as an author and podcast host, his community engagement, and the profound influence of Frank Calvin Mann on his career. This is a conversation about memory, resistance, and imagining liberated futures. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce you guys to Dr. C. Negus. Hello, sir.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm just excellent. So you still in the storm?
Absolutely. I'm in my car and it's 22 degrees and we're expecting 4 to 5 inches of snow.
Oh, I can imagine, especially where you're located.
Yeah, in the middle of Iowa.
Oh boy. So, as we are about to, as we're going to jump here into the show, I want to start with your life journey and how you got to the point of where you are now.
Oh my God, that's
Yes.
quite that's quite a question to ask. And do we have enough time? But sir, I'll give it to you this way. My name is Negus
Well,
Rudison-Imhotep.
I haven't actually. Well,
Rudison.
I was going to ask you the. I haven't asked you the question yet.
Oh, I thought you did.
No.
Okay, forgive me.
So, if you tell us, what was your upbringing like in Houston, Texas?
It was extremely interesting. I grew up in the segregated community of Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas. My father was a businessman. He had a furniture business. Uh, we had livestock, and myself and my younger brother were basically young cowboys. We took care of cattle and took care of horses. And I think my dad thought he was being Cartwright, and my little brother I was Hossa, and my little brother was Little Joe.
I hear you. So, how does your early experience shape your commitment to cultural memory?
Um, from stories that I learned by like the young folks today call it ear hustling. I used to sit by when the elders let me sit by, and I listened to stories,
Mhm.
and I learned from those stories about things that I had no idea of. I wouldn't have known, or things that I found out later in history.
Mhm. So, what inspired you to pursue both public administration and Africana scholarship?
Well, the thing, the Africana scholarship was is something that I did um, on my own.
Mhm.
Uh, Academically, I have studied political science, public administration, and business administration. But from my upbringing um, as a youth back in the mid '60s, my parents gave us Negro encyclopedias, and yeah, Johnson uh, that used to have Ebony magazine had an encyclopedia called the Negro Encyclopedia,
Mhm.
and it was a story behind it because as a child, I remember one Sunday, my parents and my brothers and sisters come from church, and we were watching after dinner. We were watching uh, 60 Minutes, and it was the civil rights movement. There was something going on in Mississippi or Alabama, and water hose were on people and dogs, and police whooping and beating people. And after the show, I looked over at my dad and told my dad, it's not our fault that we're Negroes.
Mhm.
And and my dad jumped up out his seat and grabbed me, and he told me that you need to be proud that you're a Negro. And I asked him why after what I saw, and my father he immediately started tearing up, and my mother came and held my dad, and that following week, about a week or two later, my parents had ordered the Negro Encyclopedia, and that's where I got my beginning.
Mhm.
I started reading about black people.
Wow. So, can you tell us how did you connect public administration to Africana scholarship? What was that connection about that made you want to study in that manner?
Well, it wasn't a disconnect at all because I couldn't take away the Africanness that's in me,
Right.
regardless of your political party or affiliation. You have that indelible uh, mark on you as being the that nose and lip of the original man and woman on this planet.
Mhm.
So I always, from my mother, my father was a preacher. My mother was an activist and advocate and civil rights individual. She worked with the Urban League and was the chief operating officer for the Urban League from like 1971 to like 1983 or 84. And I had a lot of equal employment opportunity, this type of thing, and knowing the plight of our people in this country, I was always focused that it was necessary to be in a position in public administration to lend an ear or give a voice so that our people would not be without representation. So that's why I felt it was necessary to combine the two. It was never separate. It was always one to me.
All right. So, Dr. Negus, are you driving right now?
No, my wife is, and with her lovely self, and it's kind of whack out here right now, to tell the truth.
Okay. So, so how did your journey into academia begin?
Well, first and foremost, I went to a private black kindergarten school in Houston, Texas. It was privately owned private school for black children
Mhm.
only. And I ended up starting there, then went to the public schools, elementary. Parents divorced back in '68, and had to move out of uh, had to move out of Houston and move to Iowa. Time in the late '60s, I had ever went to a school that was integrated. When I came to Iowa, it was a major cultural shock to go to school with white kids. But we stayed here 3 years. Mother went to school while she was here and obtained some academic credentials and had an opportunity to reconnect with people that she knew from here who were instrumental in the creation of the Houston Area Urban League and actually an individual named Quentin Meese, whom my family knew. And we ended up going back to Texas in 1971. So I went back as a maybe 11-year-old kid, went back to Texas and like reconnect with my father and other family that we had in Texas. But I stayed there, became a student, went through the public school systems. Then my senior year, my high school years, I went to a private Catholic school, and I told my mom and dad that they turned me over to the enemy when I went over to dealing with the Catholics and the Jesuits. Um, but yet
Mhm.
I went there and further went on as a student athlete. I went to New Mexico State University. I was a all conference running back at New Mexico State for about 2.5 years, 3 years. Uh, Dropped out of school because I became a parent for the second time, and third time. And then I had to drop out of school and I had to work and start taking care of children. So I had quite a long hiatus between academia and just working out in the real world without a college degree. But like in 1980, no, in 2008, I got hurt on a job. I was a construction worker. I was driving a concrete truck and had a umbilical hernia. And I knew that I was no longer going to be grabbing and pulling heavy equipment. And one of my close friends who was a minister in the church, and I was an ordained minister in the church as well. And he told me, he said, man, you might as well go on back to college. And I argued with him, like, hey, man, I'm 48 years old, almost 50. I'm talking about going back to college. And he told me to go back, and he showed me how to get back. And I did, and what startled me, that I ended up obtaining my bachelor's in like 3 weeks because
Mhm.
I had so many credits. I didn't have the documents to support that I had the bachelor's. I got the bachelor's real quick in like 3 weeks, and then I uh, got it so quick. I said, wait a minute, I might as well go back to school again and get my master's because I told my mom and dad, I promised them that I was going to get a PhD when I left off school. And neither one of my parents are alive today. Neither one of them saw me obtain a degree, but I stayed in school, and uh, from like 2010 to 2022, I obtained a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD.
Well, yeah, so how did you get into the part of instructing, becoming an instructor? You
Well,
know.
as an ordained minister and a senior pastor, I was a senior pastor of Second Baptist Church in Fort Dodge, and I always had people tell me I have a knack of teaching. I'm a storyteller. I I try to dig up as much data that I possibly can. So when I'm in front of someone and speaking on a particular topic, I know that I'm well versed, so I can explain it empirically, but then I can explain things to where just the common Joe Blow can handle it and understand. And I was at the church. I taught a lot about the African presence in the Bible,
Mhm.
and my church, a lot of the members loved it. Uh, some people were afraid because they thought I was creating some new doctrine or something because I was identifying throughout the Old as well in the New Testament the presence of black people all throughout the scriptures. So I've been accustomed to teaching and providing evidence to support what I was saying when I taught. And that's what my students what I'm doing right now at Grandview University.
So, what challenges did you face navigating both scholarship and public service?
Oh, dealing with the reality of how white supremacy racism functions
Mhm.
in America, because a lot of people uh, we look at the origins of this nation, and I'm what they label a critical race theorist. So I I support exactly that this nation was founded on racism. Every document that they ever wrote here from the Constitution on is
Mhm.
racist.
Right.
And that's not if you don't see it, you just Stevie Wonder could see it and he's blind.
And no, that's right. Um, how did your autodidactic study of African history complement your formal education?
Well, my parents always told us that readers are leaders, and my father had a library in our home in Houston, and I know it might have been about 3 to 5,000 books that he had in his library. And one time saw my dad going to the library, and he opened up a book and he put some cash in the book and closed it and put it back up on the shelf. And I said, Dad, why did you put money in that book and put it on the shelf? And we lived in Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas. He said, son, if anybody break in, they're not gonna steal no books.
Oh my God. You know, he's so true. That is so true.
Come on, man. What they gonna steal? The TV, the stereo, microwave, or,
Yep.
put your money up in your book till you know, like the old saying about black people and reading. I'm
Yes.
not gonna say it.
Right. Uh,
Hide it. Just
so, what role did mentors play in your development?
everything.
Mhm.
I had some of the best mentors and some of the worst mentors that anybody could have.
Mhm.
As a student athlete, man, I had uh, two football coaches, both played in the NFL.
Mhm.
Okay, and both of them played in the NFL, the same position I played, running back. Uh,
Mhm.
when I was in high school, I told my coach one day, I saw a record that state record that they had in high school down in Texas for a single game
Mhm.
rushing, and I looked up on the board. I mean, the week before we was going to play that team on the weekend, I said, Coach, I see this record up here. He said, Yeah, it's a 520 yards rushed in one game by Ken Hall in 1952. I said, this weekend I'm gonna break that record, and everybody in the room laughed.
Mhm.
But that weekend when we played that game, the second time I touched the ball, I had two touchdowns, 185 yards, and no one tackled me.
Oh
So
wow.
in the end, I ended up breaking the Texas high school single rushing record for one game of 500. game is. And that 1978, I made Scylla in the crowd. That, but then
Um, I can't hear you. Can't hear you. It just went out. I Ladies and gentlemen, we have the issue there with Dr. Negus. We are going to we will reschedule this event for we'll look at maybe doing it like next week. Um, Sorry about that. We'll end the show, and I'll inform you guys when we'll have him back. Wait, no, like he's back already. Um, let's see.
hello.
Yes, sir. Now I can hear you.
Oh my God, thank you. I don't know what I'm keeping my fingers away from everything.
Yeah, because I was about to just close out. Yeah, but
My God.
so so can you tell us how do you balance scholarship, advocacy, and leadership?
How do I what Scott
How do
restate
you
that statement? Sir?
how do you balance scholarship, advocacy, and leadership?
Um, it's just necessary. It's quite an ordeal to deal with, but it's necessary, and you have to find time and space to do them all and to do them effectively. Because there's no need to halfway do anything.
Mhm.
That was my objective always, to give my very best when I was doing a task, because I guess it was basically my upbringing. My father uh, never, he was a type of individual to where it was never a need for you to try to say that you couldn't do something. No, you were gonna do it. I remember my younger brother and I. My father, it was like a hurricane. hit somewhere down there in Houston back in the '80s, '70s, or something like that, he'll say like, wait, he'll call people would call and say, well, my boys will be over there. They'll cut down that tree off of your house. My boys, they're gonna come over there and do this. And I was like, I was a hired hand, man. But so I learned to go and do figure your best way of how to operate that and deal with a particular issue.
Mm.
You know, I was a teenager selling, delivering, and repossessing furniture. Okay, so as a young kid, I had guys sticking pistols in my face when I'm coming to talk about we're gonna repossess your refrigerator. You know, so
Wow.
it's always it was always something new and a learning experience.
So, what personal experiences most influenced your worldview?
Um, I can say the death of Martin Luther King stuck with me more than anything as a kid
Mm.
and as an adult. Him and Malcolm,
Mhm.
because it was devastating in my the most devastating thing that I saw in the black community at that time. That people talk about Emmett Till and George Floyd, but I remember when King was assassinated, it seems like the whole black community that I grew up in was uh, at the the highest point of mourning. It even seemed like to me when I looked and remembered that feeling, it looked like you could hear people crying down the street, up and down the street, and you could hear. It didn't even sound like the birds were singing right. You know, it was sad because people didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And at that time during that movement, people rallied, but we organized. They
Mhm.
went and organized and created things that we had. You know, it was an attempt to fight for our liberation as
Right.
a people.
Mhm.
So I remember even when a couple of years after King was assassinated, I know it was NBC did a movie about Martin Luther King, and I think it was Paul Winfield played Martin Luther King.
Mhm.
And the way they depicted the movie, I was pissed. The way they depicted King, and I told my mom I was gonna write a letter to NBC.
Mhm.
I was 12 years old, man. I wrote a letter to NBC and told them the way I felt about how they did that presentation, and NBC wrote me back. So you know, so ever since I was a 12-year-old kid then. Now I'm a 65-year-old.
Mhm.
Okay, so uh, my my parents and my upbringing and some of the people I was around, like you brought up early in the introduction about Mr. Frank Calvin Mann.
Mhm.
And I had people I met people like him and had people like Dr. Asa Hilliard the third, the Egyptologist. His daughter was my ninth grade math teacher in
Oh.
Houston.
Mhm.
So I had a lot of people like that where I saw men and women of renown, men and women who were doing things, not just the winos in the hood,
Mhm.
or the pimp in the hood, but we had doctors, pharmacists,
Mhm.
lawyers in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
So that and insurance people and all of these, we had everything we needed because we couldn't go nowhere else,
Mhm.
and we had to look within ourselves, and that's what I feel today as a people with with this type of uh system that we're dealing with. Looking at this empire uh about to leave here after its 250 years, and we got elected a king named DTJ, DJT or whatever his name is. They put him. Uh, He's think he's a royal monarch,
Hmm.
and we're dealing with another the birth of a new empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of people have been talking about the authoritarianism and all the fascism. It's always been that way. It's nothing new. It's always been that way.
So, how do you define your identity as a cultural memory keeper?
Uh, I like I said, I stayed in the library and read and read and read and read and read and kept on reading and I started. I have a pretty good memory of pulling up detailed information, and I felt that it was necessary, just like the griots and of old. Uh, Storytelling is a weapon for our liberation. Storytelling would change people's lives. I remember sitting up and listening to my father tell me about when he was a little boy up here in Marshalltown, Iowa, back in the 40s,
Hmm.
early 40s, and he was in a swing and jumped out a swing and fell out the swing, and the bone on his wrist came out his hand, and and that time in the 40s up here in Iowa, all they wanted to do was cut his hand off. And
Mm.
my grandparents said, no, no, no. And they had him in church praying for him and all that. Uh, didn't get the best uh, service because of how the medical system is here in this country. My great grandmother, who came off a plantation in Utah, Alabama, was
Oh,
my daddy's physical therapist.
oh man.
She taught him how to use his hand and not just to be an invalid.
Hmm.
He became left-handed, but she was the one that coming off a plantation picking cotton in Alabama, didn't go to nobody's college, but knew what to do to save that baby's hand because that was her grandson. So that shows me about what storytelling can do.
Wow. Let's transition over to African American history. Um, why is African American history central to your work?
Because it's central to everything on this planet.
Hmm.
Everybody, I don't care where you go, Nigeria, and the brothers bumping and popping like us. You go over in England, you see people dancing and trying to do like us.
Hmm.
Everybody looking at what we do.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't care where you go.
Hmm.
You'll find little Chinese brothers pop locking and dancing. So
Hmm.
our culture is imperative. They would sit up and say they want to get rid of this particular ethnic group of people. They're lying. They would, man. It would be so boring. And what they gonna do without some gumbo? Uh, uh, you know what they gonna do? You know they wouldn't know what to do, man. you know
you know,
they can't dance. Until we dance, they want to dance like we dance, sing
right.
like we sing, wear their clothes like we wear our clothes.
Yep.
You know,
Now I want to ask you
so
this
it's
question because what you said is so wondrous. So especially when you mentioned culture, and
hmm
what do you think about? We've got folk that have not only immigrated to this country that are in minority groups, but we have some of our people here that don't believe that Black Americans have culture. What do you think about that? So we
well,
don't
I
have.
know that's not true. We
Mhm.
know that's not true, and people can have their perceptions
Right.
because we do have culture, and just like every group has their own culture.
Hmm.
You bring uh, a white girl to the picnic, and she talking about she bringing some potato salad. Everybody ain't gonna eat it. Can't, you can't do that. My mama said if they can't use my comb, don't bring them home. So I wouldn't even bring them to no picnic like that. So it just shows you. we we got culture, man. Somebody gonna say uh the way they made that dressing wasn't right because when it's Thanksgiving and Christmas, everybody want that dressing. So it's our culture, the way we do things, just the way other groups of people do their thing.
Right. Um, how do you define cultural memory in the context of Black history?
Oh, and cultural memory is you know what? In the context of Black history, especially amongst these Christian uh, chocolate faced people, all they have to go is to the Old Testament and look at what the nation of Israel said to remind their generations after generation after generation to remind them of what they went through, how they came out of Egypt, how they did this, how they went through the wilderness. You have to remind people, and it's imperative upon us as adults to remind and tell our stories and tell our children's our stories, and even tell those who are not our children
Hmm.
the story about what our people went through. You
Hmm.
know, I look at like a brother man came out of my neighborhood back in Houston, fit one brother Mickey Leland.
Hmm.
If you remember Mickey Leland, he went over and he was a congressman from Houston, but he ended up dying over in Ethiopia
Oh.
because of when they were bringing food during the famine. And that brother was right there from our community,
Hmm.
and he was even local, he was national, but he became international and said, "Look at the common kinship that we have with our brothers and sisters on the other side of the ocean." And he lost his life over in Ethiopia, uh, bringing food to some of the famine victims at that time, and I think that was in the early 1980s.
So, what lessons from Pan Africanism resonate most today?
Uh, After reading the books from Kwame Nkrumah, I read Dr. Yusuf Ben Yakanan, Dr. Walter Rodney, uh, CLR James. After reading and those individuals, Franz Fanon, it is imperative that we must maintain the knowledge of what our struggle is about and the learn from what has happened in the past. Um, I remember Kwame Nkrumah made a comment about uh, colonialism, and if they don't watch out after the colonialists come in, there you have indirect rule, and after indirect rule, we have what we have today: people coming into Africa talking about their investors now instead of colonializers.
Mhm.
And it's the same objective as going in and raping resources from the continent so that their economies can thrive.
Yeah.
Why very little is given to the people of Africa.
You know, as you mentioned that, and as we talk about colonialism, and everybody knows the ins and outs, the do's and don'ts, and how this actually works. When we think about how that negative influence has taken place worldwide with the deception in repression and how it was done. How do our people, or how do people of color in general, what do you think some of the things they should be able to do in order to rid themselves of that slave mentality? Because it's a slave mentality that's been stuck in a lot of people's brains and minds.
Well, first and foremost is uh, to find out who you are. So many people, especially blacks in America, believe our history starts with slavery. And
Yeah.
if you don't look at our history beginning in the Nile Valley and the core of Central Africa, you're misinformed.
Mhm.
So uh, automatically, people look at us and think automatically because of the color of our skin, we're poor and we must be a criminal. You're
Yes.
criminal. You're black. You're criminal, and you're poor. And just like my father told me, he said, "Son, do you know what they call a black man or a black woman with a PhD or terminal degree?"
And what do you call them?
He said the N word,
Oh.
nigga.
So nothing changes despite
You're just a smart one.
so how do you approach decolonial pedagogy in your teaching?
Well, the first thing I do, I remove myself from thinking to center my thinking in whiteness
Mhm.
first and foremost. I'm a proponent of Afrocentric thought and perspective, and the Western school of thought, like Western journalism and the Frankfurt School of Thought. I'm here to attack that because I'm not going for nothing ever happened until Europeans discovered or invented something when we know that's a lie.
Mm. Well, I think for actually stealing everything and claiming it as your own, but then are able to come up with an actual narrative that folk
Yeah.
outside the US believe, and they come here to this country with that belief and align with that. So
Mhm.
with that being said, how do especially these folk that are immigrating here and they have that very thought in their minds, that they're so much better than us and we're less than because of that narrative that was put out by white people to the rest of the world. What are some of the
Well,
things that we can do to help them to change that? Because you see, right now, the boat they're in because of what they did right now. They're in a bad situation right
well, well, we see right now. I'm here in Des Moines, and Minnesota's right north of me,
now.
and what they're dealing with the Somalians right now, and
Yes.
how they're attacking them, and the Somalians hollering, talking about we will with Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's nice. But yet, uh, what happened there in Somalia with the Somalian population there in Minnesota uh, is affecting people here because it's another way of them just uh, colonizing another group of people here in this country.
Hmm.
You know, and labeling them when they see that the main culprit was a white woman who had all the money, and she was allocating it around to everybody.
Hmm.
So you know, so that just shows you again they don't care who they choose because one minute it was the Haitians eating cats, and the Haitians was eating ducks,
And
and then the next minute somebody calling uh country third world countries and shithole countries.
hmm
Everybody should wake up to the fact that white supremacy is on its decline,
hmm
and they see it's falling apart. Even this nation, as powerful as it once was, is not as powerful as it is today
hmm
because they made threats at one time and to conquer the whole world like the British, but now they know that uh, their resources are limited.
hmm So
I'm not saying they can't kill, but they'll still do it,
right.
but not in the same manner as they once were.
So what role does historical reclamation play in liberation movements?
Well, if you don't know your history, you don't know what to reclaim.
Hmm.
So reclaiming our history is first we got to know our history,
Hmm.
and our history is not exactly what some of these people are telling us,
Right.
unless we go into doing deep research and looking at factual information about what a lot of people went through. Uh, like basically the Western view of history here in this country. You know, that they tell you George Washington, they say that he cannot tell a lie. He chopped down a cherry tree. That's a bunch of damn myths, mythology. I'm talking about pure myth that people take as factual evidence or factual information. They
Mm-hmm.
talked about George Washington and his
Good.
false teeth. They don't tell you that those teeth was Negro teeth
Mm-hmm.
or black people teeth that he took out of black people's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that just showing us over and over again that we just can't absolutely take their word for being valid.
So you know and again, that's another valid point there you made. But let me ask you this: how do we get the folk that are actually trying to do history, do history study, right? How do we get them to learn a whole lot more about? We were already here in America, okay, and
Mm.
but still not being said that way because it's still said that the Indians are the Native Americans.
Well,
How do,
the
how,
Indians.
how do we get that right?
Okay. Well, it was an author that wrote a book called "The Lost Treasures of King Juba."
Hmm.
You familiar with the text and
Uh,
the books?
no,
The,
I've heard
the
the name before.
well, King Juba was during the time a little bit before Julius Caesar, Cleopatra,
Okay.
and he was King Juba was married to a queen from Mauritania, which is Africa, and he sent ships over here into the Western world during the time, like I say, during the time of the Roman Empire,
Hmm.
and people of they called them Canaanites, all these different labels that they put on African people,
Hmm.
were here in the Western Hemisphere uh, before uh, the birth of Christ.
Hmm.
Okay, and a lot of people are not aware of that. That's why you have in Illinois, Missouri Valley, where they have these mounds that are shaped like pyramids in southern Illinois and over in north eastern Missouri. You, you'll see that they're there. Even I remember as being a polymath that I am, remember reading National Geographic 1996, where the artifacts are the remains of a broken Phoenician ship was found in the Mississippi Delta, showing that the Africans from uh, North Egypt, what they called Israel, in that area, were over here before the birth of Christ.
Hmm.
They have a museum in Montrose, Iowa, where they have an artifact from a broken piece of one of those ships to make an artifact of that ship in a museum right here in the state of Iowa, and
Hmm.
it's called the Phoenician Ship Museum
Hmm.
right here in Iowa. Okay, and if you just put one and one together, you said Phoenician. Those are people that brought phonics. The Phoenicians. Oh, they call them in the Bible. They call them Canaanites.
Yep.
Phoenicians. They also call them Philistines, and we got the word Palestinian from that.
Yep.
So you know, we was over here before the Indian was talking about woo, 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 and had a feather in his head. Black people, if you look at the monogenetic origin of mankind, man circumnavigated the planet.
Mhm.
Everybody on this planet was black at one time.
Right. Right.
You know, you look at the Olmec civilization in the Yucatan Peninsula, where they have those heads of those African faces, Wonder why they got Mandinka symbols on 'em. And then they're
Exactly.
gonna claim, wonder where they came from.
See, but see, like that's the thing that I actually try to get some folks to understand, because they're saying that the Indians are the Native Americans and that black people came here strictly on the ships, on the slave ships. And
That's the
so
biggest damn lie in the world.
it is. It is. And just dispelling that, I'm really I was at a loss of words the last time I had that discussion, really, because I'm just trying to figure out, like, what would I have to do in order to say, look, here it is right here, maybe. But I mean, it's probably something else, I guess, that probably to more than that, not just disprove that, but to prove the truth that we were already here.
You know what? What we have to do? You can go back and look at the writings of Bartholomew Diaz, Vasco da Gama, Christopher Columbus, and when they got here, they saw some dark-skinned people. They called them Indians, and they, especially in Hispaniola, they call them what they call them Arawaks.
Hmm.
Arawak. But if you see a photo or even some of those drawings of an Arawak Indian, they look like a Negro with a feather in their head. Okay,
Well,
you look at the blacks in Hawaii back in the day, and the white folks said they ain't nothing but some curly haired Negroes over here on this island.
well,
You know,
yeah,
we circumnavigated the planet, so that just show you we was here already
yeah, and
because
so
everybody was black.
yeah, and so that goes. I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that tribe that they called the Blackfoots that was here. Those were black people.
Yeah, yeah, in Florida.
Yes,
And the
exactly.
Seminoles.
Yes, yes. So how do you see African diasporic history shaping modern identity?
Well, it has to be in the hands of African authors who need to control the narrative and to re-examine and explain it empirically to support, have data to support, show the facts. I remember Dr. John Henry Clark always said he came to Arthur Schomburg and stated that he wanted them to know African history, but Schomburg told Dr. John Henry Clark to go and study the European
Hmm.
first and look at his history. And if you knew the European history, you'll come to find out we are all over it.
Exactly.
All of the early, a lot of the Moors of the ancient medieval Europe, a lot of the nobility of Europe had a bunch of curly, nappy head black folks in it.
Hmm.
You go. I was talking to my wife the other night. One of my friends who's a professor at Iowa State said he was over in the Caucasus Mountains over in Georgia and was at a church over in Georgia, and he went over in there amongst all of these Caucasians and went up in the church and started looking at this third century church, third century uh, church, and they found out he looked at these pictures that they have in there, and all of them was black, nappy head, nice lips, juicy nose, black folks. All of the picture of Mary, the picture of baby Jesus, the picture of the disciples, all the apostles was all black folks
Hmm.
with kinky hair
Right.
in Europe, in Georgia,
Right.
that state called Georgia, Eastern Europe,
Hmm.
where Caucasus Mountains are, Caucasian.
You had did a post on LinkedIn some time ago about the group of the Africans or Black people that were in Rome, the Etruscans,
Yeah,
and I went and I actually did a blog post on that because and always knowing that we were all over the place. But when I read that post that you did, and I did a little deeper dive, it's amazing to know that what they have now today in Italy, especially Rome, and knowing that it was influenced by people that look like you and I, and how powerful and how rich they were, only to be overthrown by those uncivilized folk that came out the cave and took over and took their identity. And
Hmm.
so, and not just doing that, but also are trying to reclaim or claim something that's not theirs, but how it's said that they've always been rich, and they've always been about, this monarchy, king, queen thing, or whatever have you. How else, other than just writing and putting out this information, especially that on a group like the Etruscans, should we be getting this kind of history out to our people to learn and to know more about?
Well, I know that there are historians that are out there that's putting that information out. It's just making it available to the public, and to just make it to as a point of clarity to show folks that the Etruscans were people of Africa. The southern all the southern Mediterranean predominantly mulattoes. Okay, because they were right so close to the right there in the Mediterranean where uh, North Africa, and the trade that went back and forth from even from the times of the ancient empires of ancient Egypt to the times of the empires of the Songhai, Mali Empire. There has always been that interaction of global trade with people, and it was an author from Jamaica named Joe Augustus Rogers wrote a book called Sex and Race, volumes one, two, and three, and you see the miscegenation of different ethnic groups throughout the planet. So it just shows that the majority of the people in Southern Europe, like I stated, are darker than the Europeans up north,
Hmm.
because they said the Italians have an olive skin, the Greeks got an olive skin. Is that because the brothers and sisters is in their bloodline? That's their family.
Right.
You know, I was working downtown here in Des Moines at one time at a department store, and I was helping an old gentleman from Italy, and his name was Joe Negro.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not joking. Joe Negro. Joe Nigro.
Mhm.
This little Italian dude looked like my daddy.
Oh, wow.
He was just because my dad was lighter than me. My dad light complexion, and this dude kind of looked like my dad. And he was up there, and I said, "Sir, here's your order here. This is how much it costs." He put out his credit card. I looked at his card and said, "Joe Negro." I said, "Joe Negro." He said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm from Sicily. I'm from the old country." I said, "Yeah, I know who your people are." Hannibal Baraka and his boys went all over Southern Europe having
Oh,
fun,
yeah.
and
Um,
many others.
what are the dangers of erasing or distorting Black history?
Well, it's already been distorted, but it's impossible to erase because we we our history is just like that statement. What they say, we don't die, we multiply.